an old TV series from the 80s about the indigenous people of Colombia. But she was not only researching the series, but also the people behind a lot of women producers, actually. So take the floor.
Thank you so much, Luis. Bueno, good afternoon. It's really nice to be here with all of you today. And also, I was telling Luis that it's an honor because it's also a way back to give back to the FIAT IFTA community, since the community supported 2 restoration projects of the series since 2013 and 14, and then with Prasad, which is one of the collaborators and sponsors of the conference as well, in 2021. So it's also a way to give back and tell you and share with you what has been going on since that support was given for this Colombian television series. So today I will start by saying that, bueno, Invisible Yuruparí, or Invisible Yuruparí, as we have called it, originated as a personal research when I met Gloria Triana in 2019. She was the director of one of the main directors of the series, and she, at age of 78, was presenting her last documentary and her last film in Aracataca, where Gabriel García Márquez was born. And since that, I became very interested in not only her work, but how she worked with communities and how audiovisual methods through anthropology came into being. And after going through a master's degree in Elias Querejeta in Eskola in the Basque Country in Spain, and also started collaborating with Proimágenes Colombia, which is one of the rights owners next to Señal Memoria of RTVC, and here we have Jaime Silva. He's one of the EC members of FIAT as well. The potentialities and possibilities of this project became more clear and came into being. So I will start telling you that, I would like to tell you about 3 main topics of the project. The first is the importance of a gender approach when doing archival research, and how it draws attention to gaps such as silences, absences, and biases. Also, I'm gonna share with you briefly how a pilot exercise of participatory cataloging with the State Archive has been a radical methodology of reuse of the materials and to generate new collections and new knowledge. And also, what are the possibilities and the challenges of access strategies and ethical restitutions of materials in Colombia. So it's important to tell you a little bit about the series. Yuruparí, Traditional Popular Art, was a documentary series commissioned by the Television Audiovisuales at that time and Zine, the fund of cinematography in the 80s in Colombia. And it portrayed the richness of different festivities, rituals, indigenous populations, Afro-Colombian populations throughout most of Colombia, a lot of peasant artisanal work as well. And in that moment, to also have a little bit of context, the concept of multiculturalism or pluriethnicity was just beginning and was prior to the Constitution of 1991 that we have now. So today we recognize our country as a diverse and pluriethnical nation, but at that time having this vision of Yuruparí was very important to start declaring it as such. It is also important to mention that there were many populations portrayed that were living in the midst of an armed conflict. And it has been one of the, many of you may know, but it has been one of the longest conflicts in the Latin American region. And with this folklore perspective, these images were also left as the witnesses of the daily life surrounding the expansion of drug trafficking, victims of attacks and in the civilian population, and the infrastructure exploited by guerrilla groups and the beginning of paramilitary groups, and many murders of community leaders. So it's both a portrait of traditions that has been transformed over the course of the last 40 years. And in the words of a Colombian historian and archivist, Luisa Fernanda Ordóñez, she is the head of archives in Caracol Television, the presence of documentary language on Colombian television to point out the diversity and problems of populations in cases such as Yuruparí diverses an extensive study from a place that these productions represent in the history of Colombian audiovisuals as documents of historical processes whose traces continue to be palpable in the daily lives of our communities. So, in 1983 until 1986 and 1987, Yuruparí was a hit. It had the highest rating of television of that time during the 3 years of broadcast, and one of the most important aspects of why the series marked an audiovisual history of Colombia was its approach of visual anthropology and ethnographic cinema, containing in its images records of collective memory and shared knowledge, and its close and personal methodology with the populations during the research and filming process of the production team. However, not everything is always not colored and made of butterflies, and Yuruparí being produced at a time where other cinematographic works became more explicit in their struggle and political expression, and this one having to be adapted to a television language that entails a certain aesthetic, as we all know, the series had both friends and enemies. It was criticized with few nuances by academics and filmmakers, mainly with a focus on what was called folklore. By its third year in 1987, it was cancelled, and all the production budget that was aimed for the next year was diversified. For many, although it's not official, it was actually censored, as it became an increasingly less subtle political manifestation and tried to convey the story of the murder of former guerrilla by the state. For this reason, it is also believed that no funds were offered for the preservation of the series at that time. This was another photo of this part. So these images and sounds, which were ultimately considered dangerous, are a portrait of the traces of gestures that continue to be vividly palpable in our daily lives after many attempts of peace. They bear witness to the traces of the historical process of the populations in the midst of armed conflicts, which today continues as an invaluable audiovisual heritage for the collective memory of our region. It has been valued as one of the most complete ethnographic records of its time, with rituals, festivals, and chants declared Intangible Heritage of Humanity by UNESCO of more than 20 regions of the country as their material memory. So when we started doing research and becoming closer to the series, to the materials, and to the production team, and also acknowledging all the women filmmakers and archivists that came before me, this research project has attempted to make the participation of women visible as part of the Colombian audiovisual history that has been left in the margins. It has also provided an opportunity to understand the approach and focus on daily life, motherhood, and intimate female spaces, which has been underrepresented in the country's media until this television proposal came with this gaze. So the conventional narrative and the official narrative surrounding the series has positioned Gloria Triana, a sociologist and anthropologist, who focused all her work and all her research, and she's still alive, on popular culture. And she directed many national projects as Colombian Nights or Noches de Colombia, and she has been the main author of Yuruparí. However, she became to develop this concept with the invitation of another woman, Anne-Marie Locke, producer of the television channel Audiovisuales of that time. So in addition to them, and decentralizing and this biased focus of the productions team view, the work of 22 other women who were also involved in the production and editing of each episode has been acknowledged. And I wish to publish this in a paper soon. And in many other ways, Yuruparí marked the beginning of an alternative representation. And in the words of Jorge Mario Munera, one of the still photographers of the production, Yuruparí was a radical and political project of that time. So, regarding to its materiality, there is much to say and much to discuss, but today I want to make an emphasis on the support made by FIAT IFTA with Save Your Archive projects, as many of you may know, and we're gonna have a talk tomorrow by Verduli, exacto. And also in collaboration with Prasad. And thanks to the work of Juan Suárez, the director of the MIA program at NYU, who first gave light to the importance of this collection, and the collaboration with RTVC-Señal, Memoria, and Proimágenes Colombia, institutions joined forces, also with Fundación Patrimonio Fílmico colombiano, and managed to obtain not only this grant, but also support from the Smithsonian National Museum of African American Culture and Black McDowell in the US to begin the restoration of Yuruparí in 2003. Furthermore, RTVC-Señal Colombia and Proimágenes Colombia continued with the digital restoration in Colombia after the digital scans, and in 2021, also with the work of Juan Suárez and the Colombian Institutes, FIAT IFTA Save Your Archives came again with a second grant to continue this restoration. This has been very important because it has been a work of many people, and it has implied that many institutions have had to work together. The project is still ongoing, and there are more than 26 finished episodes of the 85 that were recorded in total, without going inside the description of the audio rushers, photographies, documentations around the collection. But for this part, I want to show you a very brief clip. It's about a minute and a half of the first FIAT IFTA Save Your Archive project in 2000. This video is from 2014, so that you can also live a little bit about how these images and sounds were evoked.
Sobre estos archivos se ha hecho balance y retoque de color, limpieza y remoción de manchas. A la vez, se han hecho ajustes manuales y automáticos en la restauración de la imagen, tales como AutoPaint, edición digital de empalmes, composición digital, pan scanning, reencuadre y ajuste de la relación de aspecto. Para la remasterización de sonido, se ha hecho reducción de ruido wave WNS y reducción de saturación, declickering, eliminación de hum y hiss, aumento de nivel y ecualización cuando ha sido necesario. Cinecolor ha tenido especial cuidado en restaurar los materiales sin descuidar la estética original de la serie, que fue filmada entre 1982 y 1986 en 16 milímetros, color, cinta de poliéster. También hemos subtitulado al inglés e insertado closed caption para aumentar el radio de audiencia.
So, from this resurgence, led by the material exercises of Yuruparí, the series gained a second life, and all possible paths that emerged to continue working on its access, reuse, and circulation, thinking about the consolidation of a living archive beyond the preservation vaults. Since its inception, Yuruparí has called upon us to reflect on the memory and reuse strategies of populations portrayed, as well as the nuances of anti-colonial practices, and do research with creative work with state archives and public collections. So there has been many efforts and initiatives from the institutions, such as the publication of 11 of its episodes in RTVC Play. At the end, I will give you a QR code. The 11 episodes are placed because they are cleared of music rights. That has been a very specific topic that we can talk about later, and maybe here also with Jaime. And also the project called The Return of Yuruparí, which was restarted last year, with the intervention of showing and portraying the restored chapters in the towns which were which were filmed. These have been fundamental to continue the purpose of a second and more in-depth strategy regarding the access of film and television as a political and collective exercise of our memory in the populations. However, during the research, we have arrived at questions, very complex questions, such as how to create a methodology for collective anti-colonial identification and cataloging of a state audiovisual archive or collection, as well as can a first approximation to dignified access of public collection lead to a path of ethical restitution of materials. So in order to carry out an embodied exercise as part of a project that wishes also to promote pragmatic experiences, we implemented a pilot of what today may be a possible ethnographic and community vision for the preservation of our memory. Bueno, the letter is a bit small, but on one hand, we developed the first cataloging and collective identification series with populations in Colombia, a strategy and recovery of local knowledge and oral memory, both individually and collectively, around the archive materials of Yuruparí, in the regions that the film had been filmed. It is based in the intersection between anthropology and archive, and has had the objective to co-create a complementary cataloging proposal filled with emerging categories and fields of information which dialogues with the populations portrayed. This parallel database of the official inventory of the institutional archives presents different costumes, characters, geographies, among many other categories, that have emerged from the ethnographic view of the content in its episodes and could lead to the production of relevant inventory and metadata and critical identification of appropriate exhibition scenarios. There are various metadata challenges and suggestions still to be taken into account in order to make this into a more friendly process and more accessible to the users that have been participating. Furthermore, as we also discussed with Juan Suárez in a panel at Cinemateca de Bogotá in 2020 during COVID, we discussed the need of a more anthropological and accessible approach to this collection. There are many images that were these images are a pilot of what the collective cataloging and an identification exercise we did in San Basilio de Palenque with the communication collective Cuchasuto, led by Rodolfo Palomino, and the participation of Silvia Miranda, a very close friend, where we invited 6 people from different ages and backgrounds to watch the chapter and the episode Angélica la Palenquera from 1983, and then we discussed several proposed points. So this was a bit of the experience. And the experience turned out to be much more special than we initially imagined, triggering memories, processes, and oral histories, and it became the methodology to propose a broader project together with RTVC-Señal Memoria and Proimágenes Colombia. The different people invited wanted to speak about the chants and dances and had a special interest in the Lumbalú representation, which is a funeral ritual in the Palenque culture. It only happens in this region in Colombia, which involves music and performances, but they also showed very much interest and excitement to see the architecture of the houses 40 years ago and how the clothes had changed. One woman noted specifically that a pair of shoes that a person from the Lumbalú wore is no longer used. And many of them laughed when they recognized somebody from the episode, and they wanted everybody in their family to watch it. So in order to continue this process and this much bigger project, the implementation of a methodology at a wider scale is yet to be carried out with the collaboration of the institutions that safeguard Yuruparí with the support of anthropological faculties in Colombia, and a collaborative strategy with local communication groups in different regions of Colombia. All of them we have worked previously in different projects. This final intention will be the design of a multimedia platform where the collective cataloging tools, together with the analysis and the recovery of oral memory, can be supported with diverse creative aspects, such as the publication of photographs and testimonies of the process. For this, we aim to discuss specific themes such as privacy settings, shareability, linkage between contexts with the people involved, and the regional dissemination strategy, always keeping in mind that there is a structural limitation in access to internet in rural communities of the country. However, we are still encountering challenges regarding budget and resource prioritization for appropriate catalog software or specific technological developments to go forth with the aim of this research. That's our object at the moment. So to start concluding, I would like to share that all these strategies and efforts of cataloging, access, and reuse, creation and circulation are in the end tools against loss. A reconfiguration of official narratives imposed in Colombian and Latin American archives, where restoration is the beginning of a process to shed light and emphasize on the microhistories in the margins, still until revealing a microhistory. Restitution has normally been done from state to state, but now we want to do it at a community level. And Yuruparí, in this order of ideas, has become a case study that presents other possible readings and practices on access to audiovisual archive collections from a collective perspective and thought, and has the potential to become an access project, more than an access project, but also a democratic and powerful tool that we can all engage to. So here is the QR code if you want to access the 11 chapters of Yuruparí at RTVC Play. And I thank you a lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laura. Are there any questions in the room? I was wondering about a thing. When the series was closed in the 87 or something, was it only for political reasons, or was it also something to do with the fact that it was a woman who produced the series?
I'm very glad you asked this. There's no official narrative of the closing of Yuruparí or the not continuity of Yuruparí, but there are many hypotheses. One of them is that it became uncomfortable. It became much more and more political than the state was willing to accept on TV, broadcasted on TV. The second is that in that moment, the government changed, and the next government was not as in favor of projecting it. The third one was the figure of Gloria Tiana, which had become much more a much broader public figure, and was having a much more power in the public scene. And the fourth one is that there was a mission of the Colombian government to get into the NATO list, the non-aligned government countries, and it used Yuruparí to get into the alliance. And after that, Yuruparí was no longer of use. So there are many, many hypotheses. But thank you.
Thank you very much. Any more questions? No, but thank you very much for... Oh, there was one. Sorry.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I was interested in this project, Save Your Archive of Yuruparí. I don't know very well Colombia's history, but anyway, it was very interesting. So, and I want to know that how was the reaction of viewers in Colombia after the digitization of Yuruparí film? The reaction of the viewers,
yes.
Young viewers or older viewers?
Yes, well, the return of Yuruparí, el retorno de Yuruparí, has been one of the activities and actions that the institutions have done together. And here, maybe Jaime can also tell you a little bit. But they have implemented like a portable way to get the restored episodes to the communities. They're very rural communities. So a big screen is placed that are blown up, and they put it in the main plaza, as television was placed before, 40 years ago, in the main plaza for all the populations to watch. And it has been very interesting. So people from all ages go, from small kids to older people, and not only is there is the vision, but there is, since last year, they have been interacting with the materials. So they have been coloring them and putting different music on top of the images. So it's been very interactive, and I think it's been a very interesting first phase to see what else can be done with this series.
Thank you. Do you want to make a comment? Okay. Oh, that's...
Yeah. Yes, I can only but praise this, and by accident, 2 weeks ago, I attended the inauguration of a photographic exhibition in Brussels, and it was done by the Peruvian embassy themselves. It was called Si Vivo con Ivo, Retratos de mi Sangre. So Si Vivo con Ivo, Portraits of My Blood. So it's a photographer belonging to this neglected community. So for me, it's like a surprise that little by little the political power in Latin America, they're starting to support the resurgence of these communities that are almost forgotten by everyone.
It's interesting that you share this, and with Peru there are, of course, como contextual similarities and a lot of differences as well. But what I find really interesting now is that from the past 20 years, or maybe even a bit after Yuruparí was cancelled, the same communities started producing their own material, and the questions about their archives and the dialogue that we can make with the state archives and the representation that others have made for them and their own representation is still, that could lead to a whole research of what are the differences and similarities of how we look. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Well, then I want to thank you, Laura, for a really interesting presentation. So now I think maybe there's a small break. And then see you, there's a sponsors event, I think, again. And then at 5 o'clock we have the presentation of the awards, nominated awards categories. So thank you very much.